You're listening to episode 743 of a VerySpatial podcast, August 3rd, 2024.
Coming and going, life's so quick.
Hello and welcome to our VerySpatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
And this is Frank.
And this week, we wish Barb well since she's
taking care of a sick puppy dog. He
Yes,
apparently ate something he should not have.
because that's what puppy dogs do.
That's
Yeah.
what they do. And it's having the effect that you would think. She just needs to be near a door. So not doing the podcast.
And we thank her for that.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure you thank her more than we do.
Yes.
I think
We
more than-
feel for her for having to open the
Yeah.
door and go out with the doggy, but
It's not fun. My brother's dog once ate a chair. So there you go.
not the whole chair. Just,
enough to cause
Enough
a
of the
problem.
chair?
yes.
It was a Rottweiler, so big dog, big chair. She was okay, though, afterward. Eventually.
Okay. So, on those notes, we are coming up on, well, a conversation. I guess maybe we should start with the little bit. Is there anything from the UC that we actually want to talk about?
You know what? I was astoundingly absent from paying attention to UC this year. And I think it's because they've gotten in the habit of doing they do the announcement like 2 weeks ahead of time. This is what the update is.
Yeah.
So,
Like you were saying last time, so much of it is in on ArcGIS Online that it's already, out before the UC starts.
yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, I know a lot of people from West Virginia went there. There was a pretty good turnout. I got to see not videos, but photos from people in the West Virginia Association of Geospatial Professionals. So they had a lot of good things to say. And they came back thinking the field apps are something they need to put a lot more energy into, their own personal energy into. So I presume that was relatively dominant in their experience.
I think whenever I was watching the keynote, there's always a lot of little things, but there was no, this is the thing that we're kind of pushing this year. And I think, whenever we started, it was that kind of thing where there was a lot of specifics that were being rolled out at any given time. But now we've gotten to the point where so much is kind of rolling out. And a lot of it is moving between old software and new software or desktop and onto online, that it's not necessarily a new thing per se. It's more that it's notable that it's there, but it doesn't have that same mid-2000s we're making slippy maps kind of feel that the old, UC and Where 2.0s and all these other conferences, we had these things that were happening that were changing not just the industry, but how people outside the industry was using and interacting with the industry. So it's just a different feel.
Yeah, and I think for me, because this is the time of year that those of us as educators start looking at the calendar and going, wow, we have like less than a month for most of us or so until we start again, is starting to think, how are we going to present our courses to students this year, right? What's the takeaway of any changes we might have to make? And I think that this year was continuing, when we talked about a few things that were, in fact, as you said, Frank, announced beforehand. So especially got me thinking about a web editor, although I haven't had a chance to play with it yet. But the dilemma that I continue to see kind of each year for the last few years is the balance between things that have been moving online, so the modern GIS, but also those concepts that I think are still best taught on the desktop, especially if you have, if you have things that someone might do in a different type of software, but still GIS. I still think the desktop and how to use an application is a really important thing, but it's trying to find that balance now because a lot of the new things are coming out in one environment, the online part of the ecosystem maybe. But on the other hand, I still think the value and the importance of the desktop. So anyway, so the things that as I kind of went back and reviewed stuff that I took away from this year's UC is just kind of continuing that conversation in my mind over, how much should I adopt that might be part of the new stuff? How much do I still want them to have the grounding? Because right at the end of the day, every semester we still have 16 weeks in a regular semester here in the U.S., so still limited amount of time. And that just is getting I guess, more frustrating for me a little bit internally every year to try to say, well, I want to do these 5 new things. But if they don't understand this other thing that I've taught every year before they do the 5 new things, they're not going to get it, kind of. So anyway, so for me, it's kind of, as I plan my classes, seeing what's come out, everybody, that kind of thing has been how I've kind of approached it.
Yeah, I think that this is a general trend. To go back to what Jesse was saying, in technology in general, sorry, that everything's very evolving as opposed to, I was just thinking about my iPhone is getting a little jerky, a little slow, a little problematic. It's about 6 years old now. 5. I know it's an 11, so it's a few old. And I was kind of thinking of maybe when the new ones come out, we'd upgrade. And I was sort of looking at the rumors that are coming out for the 16, and I was like, it's all the same, sort of micro evolution, important stuff. A better camera is a better camera. It's nice. More memories, it's nice. But it's nothing, oh, I have to really have this feature. And even when I'm seeing people are saying, well, yeah, the 16 is cool, but you really should wait for the 17 because they're fundamentally going to change things. And you say, well, how? And they go through the list and I'm like, it's just an evolution. It's nothing that I can see that's really fundamental groundbreaking. And so when I was thinking about that, I was in the UC, I was like, well, that's sort of the same thing here, is that we're just slowly rolling towards certain things and then rolling towards certain other things. And it's not so much a massive schismic shift to this. It's, oh, we're drifting this direction now. Oh, okay. Oh, now we're going to drift back that direction. So it's sort of constantly staying on top of that rolling ball as opposed to, kind of predicting where to jump or where it's going to jump next.
And I think that our idea that these things are supposed to be whiz bang, there's something new every year, kind of comes from, again, the 80s into the 90s and into the early 2000s. But now I think that it's the conversation, right? It's not going to something like the UC or Hexagon Live or whatever conference it might be to see the new thing. You may go there to talk to people and to go to very specific deep dive sessions that you're interested in, but it's really about the conversations, about the community. And that's what these events are about. And that, kind of ties into what we were talking about with Bern last time. And yeah, I think it's just, these things are just changing what they are. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that society is more interested in the conversation and community now than what the neatest and greatest technology is going to be. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Or they're interested in the outcome, right? Like, I don't care about the sausage making. I just give me the damn sausage. And so if you go online to make a thing using that particular tool set, but then you have to download it to GIS-Pro to do this type of analysis and then re-up that to, I don't care. Just show me, where the problem areas are or the opportunities are or the issues I'm facing on a map. Just show me.
But again, that's less, the conference is less about that unless you're going somewhere to talk to someone about an issue that you're having, because you're spending a lot of time on Google or on Reddit or on Stack Exchange or something like that to have those conversations, community for the various sites. So yeah, I just
I think though I would agree with what both you're saying, but I would say that one of the things that still I find is that there's a lot of power in being one of the ones that's actually trying something, right? Because as you say, Frank, right? I want to see the results. So of all of this array of fancy technology, and we try to keep up with it and all of that, the things that tend to stick are things that people on the right day show the right people, hey, this is how it works and this is what I can use it for. Because of the 15, 20, 30 different examples you might see, the one that resonates you might be the one to say, all right, so I can see how to apply that technology. And I could see it in my case. And so sometimes that's it, right? And it goes all the way back to some of the early episodes, like, we talked about just information overflow and what you end up remembering or what ends up getting kept is the thing that you see a connection to. So one of the cool things that a part of the community, right, is that you do come and say, this, you might start off with this is my problem, but you might see the thing that among all of the cool gadgets or whatever, the thing that you say, all right, in my particular use case, not only does that give me the result I want, but actually I can see my path to get there. either you've explained it to me or the skills I already have is say, that's it. All right. So for example, I could go and see something super cool in Linux, that's built with Linux, but I would be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to learn Linux to do that. So I'm going to move on. But someone else who knows Linux might be like, that is awesome. And I can do it. All right. So I think that's one of the cool things about being in the space of the UC or any of these places where you have the community coming together is that it is like, in some ways it's in a person where you can go to Google or Reddit or the various forums, but something about just being there in the moment and seeing it and being able to say, back and forth, hey, this is my case. What do you think? Kind of thing with participants, with presenters. I mean, that was always the cool part too for when we were going to the UC is getting to go to all the sessions and just seeing how people were actually doing it. And, just yesterday, right? Got back into a little bit of testing out with some VR again. And I keep going to VR and leaving because although I can envision how I might want to do it, right, I have to actually follow through with it. And so maybe I go and I see something like that among the many, whiz bang types of technologies we've seen over the years. But that I think was always for me the great thing about just attending all of the conferences we've been to is just to see it in action.
So we are at that time of year. Every year we get to August. And as Sue alluded to earlier, we are contemplating our coming semester, the next semester after that, maybe the summer after that, and how we're going to look at geography. And that's it, right? We are a geography podcast that spends a lot of our time talking about geospatial, but we're still geographers and we talk about spatial things. We just a lot of times use software and technologies to kind of support that and to give students kind of an entree into a lot of the fields and experiences they might have in the real world. So I think that's the question right now. Not are we picking up modern GIS, but what is it that we're doing in terms of geography right now that we're doing as we're going forward this year? What are our thoughts on geography and what kind of geography we want to focus on this year? What things of geography we want to focus on this year? So I'll kind of kick off and of course give the most obvious one and probably take a little bit of what Frank might have talked about. And that is, we've got a lot of conflict going on in the world and it's having an impact on the political geographies, but also the economic, the food geographies and security. We can go down through the whole list of natural hazards and more importantly, in this context, human hazards that have an impact on us in these areas that are changing geographies day to day. And they may not have long-term ramifications, but they definitely have short-term ramifications. And we're not even sure where they're going to end up. Some of them have been going on since, 10 years ago. So I guess it was 2 Summer Olympics and 3 Winter Olympics ago, whenever Russia decided to start with Crimea and is continued on with that expansion. Of course, we have what's going on in Israel, and they've, of course, expanded from focusing on Gaza and now are looking at it as more of a regional thing. And so, we have a lot of these things, and those aren't the only ones. They're just the ones that are the most notable on TV and have some of the largest amounts of money behind them right now. And of course, we're all still curious of what's going to happen in the context of Taiwan in the next 4 to 5 years. So yeah, that's one of those things that I think whenever I'm talking about geography, it's just one of those things in the back of my mind. How do you talk about how these things are changing what we think of as geography in these areas?
So I was trying to think of a way to not start with an election, but that's as a political geographer, as a political scientist, I'm going to start there. And of course, there's only 90 something odd days as of recording left in the election, but there's always going to be post-game analysis and why this was here and that was there and what the changes across space. And of course, from a geographer standpoint, it's fascinating to look at county level stuff as opposed to state level stuff. And then, then look at things like urban versus rural and all that kind of stuff is going to be irrespective of the policies that embodies. And no matter the outcome, it's going to be fascinating as a geographer and a political scientist to sort of tease that out, sort of try to understand what pieces resonated with what space. So that's going to dominate a whole bunch of easily through March, if not further, into the sort of thinking, for me at least. However, I discovered something about 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago, something like that. I don't think it's a week, but almost a week ago. That is piqued my interest. There's a guy that has a YouTube channel, and the video that I saw that was really interesting, and I don't remember his name, and I'll try to make sure we get a link in the show notes for it. He did a thing about why is Edinburgh the way it is? And he basically looked at the map of Edinburgh, and he more or less goes through all the way from the Glacier Age till modern day, talking to a guy he's a prominent geographer, maybe the official geographer of Scotland. I can't remember what he is, and he shows the maps and how it evolved and how it changed and stuff like that. And I was like, this is really fascinating and kind of an old school way to think about geography, but I think it's really neat that he's doing that and talking about the historical context and linking that to the social development of the region, to the physical geography of the region, the whole thing. And that has really intrigued me. And I'm trying to think of how to do things like that for areas that I'm a little more familiar with, how to engage on that. So that's got me excited. And I really want to try to do that at some level this year. I don't know that that's anything YouTube or VerySpatial related or anything like that, but it could be, or maybe just fun for Frank. I don't know.
Well, I think for me and my cultural landscape focus, that a lot of what I've been thinking about recently in terms of projects working on and what I'm going to talk about with students, and especially when I talk with them in the spring and even over Christmas, because I have a couple opportunities to do education abroad. But I've really started taking a look at a lot of the discussion on over tourism, or on tourism numbers and people, and thinking about, one of the things I do is try to represent landscape and experience of landscape. And it's really interesting that a lot of the mechanisms that I've been using in my own work to say, well, this is how we can capture elements of experience, right? Are also, interestingly, those things, as we see the social media explosion, right, that are looked at as, I must go and capture this moment in this place, and it's driving a lot of people to visit places that they're not experiencing the same way. So that's always the catch-22. This is definitely not a new thing, right? It's always the catch-22 of tourism, is especially if you talk about, idyllic landscapes or peace and quiet, or, this or that. As soon as you change the dynamic by having a lot of people there, it changes the experience. And my question increasingly too is, like, in those moments, are you really are you really experiencing the landscape and its elements? And what might be different and going on, right? So this is me kind of getting up to speed, because there's a lot of work in this area from lots of different disciplines. But for me to kind of contemplate it as I think about replicating those things, if that's what I want to do, and how my very act of doing it, is capturing something different, and maybe looking at that from a different lens might be something that I think students should think about, or people should think about when you're having a discussion on geography, right, in landscape and inhabiting landscape. What is really going on there. So anyway, I mean, obviously I'm still kind of catching up to my thoughts on that, but it's something I hadn't thought about in doing this sort of work until I really started taking a look at that, and especially some of the flashpoints that have been happening this year, as we've seen the real ramp up, a couple years now to really ramp up post COVID, as people start traveling all over the world, or have started and continue to travel all over the world.
I put the link in the show notes to the video, and this shows how busy Frank has been, because that actually just came out yesterday. And for some reason in my brain, I had shot that back 3, 4, 5 days. So I just apparently watched it yesterday. It's a gentleman, and I think I've seen one or two of his videos before, and I'm not going to speak to how, name is Daniel Steiner.
If you take a moment to look,
subscribers, but I did like the way he presented it, and of course, I like old maps, and he basically uses the old map as a mechanism for explaining why these things happen. So, and the gentleman he engaged with is, let me find that. He's got a book. It's an expensive book, but he's got a book it's the National Library of Scotland. He works there, and his name is Christopher Fleet. He's the author, one of the two authors of this book. So
go check that out. I don't know. We've got another year coming, and at the same time that we're teaching, we're also doing stuff. We continue to try to do VerySpatial as we lumber towards 20 years.
Another thing that I want to do this year, and I've been wanting to do for about at least 5 or 6 years, but I really do want to jump on the Reels, TikTok, whatever the heck they're called, little short videos, but for an educational point, like, what is scale? And just, a 30-second, 1 minute quick thing about this is scale. What is, what do we mean by color theory in cartography? Little things like that. I really want to do those short videos because I think they would be useful for a whole lot of people, but it's just carving out the time is always the tricky bit.
Got to write them.
Yeah, that's the thing. I got to write them, and then I got to video them, and then I have to not look at the video and then go, wow, I sound and look like an idiot. I just have to look at the video and edit it. So that's always the tricky bit.
You can use those little cartoon things.
I thought about that. I was like, and then it doesn't involve me, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But we're actually cleaning up our podcast space. You can't see this because obviously it's audible only, but we've cleaned up our podcast space quite a lot. Unfortunately, the particular angle that Jesse and Sue see looks like we're under construction, but we're not. Yeah, it is going to be a decent space to do those things. So I should really.
Well, it's maybe, get a not laptop camera.
Yeah, well, there's that too, but
that would change the angle. We've got the Recreatus podcast that we're doing on digital heritage, and hopefully I will be able to get Dr. Bergeron to sit down sometime in the next 3 weeks to record the first 2 video episodes so we can start getting those up. That's a 10 episode series that's funded by the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. That is supposed to be done at this point, but we've had some issues getting students hired because they don't seem to want to apply for jobs. So we'll see how that goes. But I think I'm just going to heavy hand it and have them involved, but just kind of press forward.
Sometimes you gotta.
Yeah, because we have another year to get them done, and it's a good topic to have a podcast and video series on. It's just starting it, as we all know, is a problem. So if you want to listen to the first 2 episodes, which is me and a couple of the students that were working in the spring, but they both graduated, which is why basically we got them up to speed and ready to go, and then they graduated.
And they left.
It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
It's a dilemma in our world, in student working, is that when we get them up and, well, what we're basically doing is, I guess, our job. We're training them to go elsewhere and be successful. And they are. It's just we look back and go, I wish you were still doing that for me.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that. You can go over to Recreatus, which is RECREAT.US, Recreatus, and check out that podcast, which is it's about virtual heritage, but we're doing kind of digital heritage broadly to give it context for the first couple of episodes of the video series. And again, we'll be doing audio, short audio at least, not like these hour-long, sometimes, conversations, more focused.
So another thing I'm doing is our institution's pushing micro-credentials a lot. And for good or bad, it's certainly a debatable point, but it is something that our institution has decided is a focal point, a strategic point maybe. So what I'm going to try to do is work up some geospatial micro-credentials that, use a mix of Esri's courses in the virtual campus and stuff that we put out to kind of put it together into a cohesive unit. And so I think that'll be kind of fun and kind of interesting to do to, what is a micro-credential? And so I'm thinking like enterprise GIS, a micro-credential and getting it set up and configured, that type of thing. So that'll be fun and challenging to do, micro enough to be a micro-credential, but macro enough to be meaningful and useful.
Do you want to try to define micro-credential today?
I'm going to give you a half-hearted attempt. There is a definition, but it is also very different from institution to institution. And it's in our institution, in our state, it's still in, let's just call it alpha form. It's still being pushed around and workshopped a bit. But basically, the idea behind a micro-credential is a body of knowledge or information that is cohesive, yet very directed at a specific topic.
So like an 8-hour course would be like a 1-day workshop type of thing equivalent content?
It's a good question. And this is where the scale problem comes in terms of education, because they've talked about a series of 3 of those may be a micro-credential. Or a certain number of those things could count for Y number of credit hours in a higher education institution. The idea behind a micro-credential really is to get you to sort of, once you've bought into the micro-credential and you got enough of them together, maybe you should start thinking about a major or getting a degree or, something like that. That's sort of the idea, the not so hidden agenda behind the scenes. So there's a whole lot of math to figure out. How does a micro-credential, translate into a 3-hour course, or does it, or, all that stuff. So that's why I said it's really, really on shifting sands, which is why I did a really terrible job of answering your very simple and very good question, because we don't have one yet.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There is no accrediting body for these things at this point. So without that, you don't have anything to point to and say, that's what it is.
Well, there's also questions and not yet a consensus on who they're pointed towards, right? Because some of it would say, well, this is continuing education for professionals. Others are like, well, but these are things that, students could tailor the undergraduate level and get out. So even there, right, you run into definition questions, because the micro-credentialing and the length, right, the number of minutes that you're all those things have very different meanings depending on what level you're at, because some bring in rules that come in the U.S. from our Department of Education. Others, are different professions that have like rules on that, and it's just it's tough to sort out.
Where of course you can just toss out the good old fashioned badges. We don't need no stinking
Now
badges.
we tried the badges at our university.
Yeah, we have
one department tried some of those.
We have a whole software that does badges.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing we subscribe to that and it keeps track of them. And actually it is in West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission. They're setting up policy for micro-credentials. And that's one of the things in there is that you do have to keep track of the badges and all that stuff as part of your documentation requirements.
Yeah.
Which is creating its own headaches, because we're used to documenting degrees and minors and stuff like that. But it's luckily I'm not directly involved in those pieces of it. But it is a big, I'm tangentially involved, which is why I know a little bit about it. And on top of that, you'd say there's no accrediting body, but accrediting bodies are now starting to look at micro-credentials. And so as something they could accredit, but then that's going to throw a whole nother layer of definitions and whatnot on top of it. So if theirs is different than, for example, the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission and whatever organization works in your state, that, governmental organization that keeps track of this stuff, then how do you reconcile that? And it's a very fluid area.
What do they call that? Like a liminal space, right? It's not. Is that what the term is? That they're floating in between, like, because they don't necessarily fall under the rules that we know of for programs, but if they're not within the space of the higher education body, then what's the point, kind of thing. So they're sort of in that space. It's like a Venn diagram thing.
Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, I was just laughing. I was just thinking about like liminal space stuff that are just out there, and they could float closer to things like attractors, but they could also be repelled by some of the rules in the program.
So now you're adding chaos theory into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just crazy.
And a lot of this actually is derived from basic demographic problems, the demographic cliff that we're all dealing with in higher education in the United States. I think other places as well, but certainly within the United States. Of, okay, now we have a lot less students and we need to, still keep the lights on. So how do we do that? And so I think that, to your question, Sue, I think that a lot of debate now is happening between like you said, is it continuing education? And if so, is this something for GIS professionals that are trying to get, training hours for the GISP? Does it fit that need? Or, teachers trying to pick up skills for their continuing education that they're required in many states. West Virginia is one where they are. That's one dimension. And then the other, of course, is it a recruiting tool to get students who, decided not to go to college, but then, pick up this micro-credential and they go, oh, I actually kind of like this. This is fun. This is enjoyable. Maybe I can continue on and then go to college a little bit, later in life. And everyone seems to agree that both scenarios would be wonderful and we should focus on both scenarios. But the problem is that who you market it and how you market it and how it's designed and, all that sort of stuff isn't the same for both audiences, and that creates its own tensions and problems. So it is a very fluid space that is kind of fascinating. And I just thought, oh, wait a minute, GIS, this is a great place where you could do micro-credentials. If you just get it back down to brass tacks, and you could go either direction, because we can focus on very specific skills and very specific outcomes and things that people could pick up, I think.
Yeah. I've had the luck to work with a PhD student in education over the last year, and luckily get the chance to work with her again this year, who's looking at, just completely forgot the goji. It's not pedagogy. It's not hudagogy.
Oh, I don't even know them all. Can't help you.
It's the one that starts with an A. But it's basically looking at adult learners, and one of the things that she's been finding as she's looking at these things more and more, and she's really deep diving into some of the communities that are talking about it, is the fact that we have so many people who are approaching or at retirement age who are looking at doing not true retirement, but basically shifting to a new area and looking for training in those areas. So yeah, it's just becoming a whole other thing that we think of adult learner as being someone who's looking for changes in job placement. But no, now we're talking about not the 30 to 50-year-old or 30 to 60-year-old. Now we're looking at that population of 60 plus, and the opportunities to be a little bit, it's not Machiavellian, I don't know what it would be, but basically another
pragmatic.
Pragmatic, yeah, that would be a good way of putting it. Another population to pull on if universities would do so. Now it's kind of weird because also most states have low or no tuition for people who are in an age group, and every state's a little bit different. Some it's 55, our state at 60. I don't remember what it is in West Virginia. I did look it up, but yeah, it's just a whole other population. And if they become degree seeking, then they pay fees and things like that. If they're not, then it's less that they pay. And it's just a whole body of people that we could take advantage of.
Yes. Well, that also adds another dimension to the content too, because some of them are just as much interested in enriching kinds of micro-credentials, right? So we've focused on kind of the skill-based ones, but there also is a whole rich area for these types of micro-credentials in concept, or, in areas like, someone might go to a museum, but if they've had a little micro-credential in art history, then they can appreciate the symbolism and all that kind of stuff that maybe they didn't get exposed to. Or, in our area, I was just talking with another faculty about, someone trying to understand some statistics things, and their problem wasn't so much that they couldn't manipulate, whatever the equations were, is that they didn't have a good grasp on the other concepts of data interpretation. And so those kinds of micro-credentials where, I look at a data set and I see a regression line, and what am I actually looking at? Right? What does it mean for hypothesis testing, or what is the true significance, right? Those types of things, some of it is practical, but some of that is also kind of concepts so even the content of what you would do with a micro-credential is it's wide open. And so I think those kinds of things are somewhat cool, but they definitely fly in the face of the structure of higher education in most places, right? Which is built around these lengthy terms and time invested, and so I think the balance is hard. But
we have to. I shouldn't say the word change. We don't need to change higher education. We need to broaden what we think of as higher education.
Back to the evolve thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe evolve is not so. Change is happening anyway, but evolve in how we conceive of it and what the goal. Anyway, there's lots to talk about this, but it's one of those things again where when you're trying to apply it in your case, suddenly the talking has to have once again, I go back to one of my favorite metaphors, and most of you would never have seen this, but it was a Dilbert cartoon that had a whole bunch of people sitting around the table, and then the first one says, "My project is a paradigm," and then the next one goes, "My project is paradigmatic," right? And nobody knows. Or the example from a TV show called Better Off Ted, where there's this project that everybody's like getting on board with called the Jabberwocky Project, but it's made up, and no one wants to admit it's made up. But then the last person gets it, they ship it off to research in Japan, and there's a folder on it that says Jabberwocky, and the response from the scientist is, "I just wish there was a second page." Right? I just wish there was a concrete explanation of what's going on.
I think it was
So
Is there a page missing?
yeah, or is there a page missing, right? So where's the second page? But I feel like that with a lot of things, and right in this discussion on micro-credentials and just trying to like grasp something is so slippery, but yet could be so cool. I think it's something that we all grapple with. But
So for those of you who are like, Jesse, you're an idiot, the word is andragogy. So my memory does come back eventually. So
I didn't know what that was.
pedagogy, hudagogy, andragogy. Pedagogy, of course, our traditional idea of what we do in K to 16 area. Hudagogy is how we self-learn. So that's really tied more into like the MOOCs and what we do as adult learners as we teach ourselves things. And andragogy is getting into that adult learner type of space where we're trying to, they're still talking about different ways to approach that. And this, micro-credentialing is just something that can be used in any of those three gojis. I did get a certificate in this stuff.
Well, there you
I
go.
got
It was
it.
like, I just knew the one.
I learned something new. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's right. TIL, right?
I don't know what that means.
That means today I learned.
Oh,
Today I learned.
Yes.
see, for me, that's the old NBC, the more you know, but okay.
Nice. That works too.
Yeah, it works too.
But
And
I'm not
as
cool.
G.I. Joe told us, knowing is half the battle. Oh, wait, that was He-Man. Knowing is
no,
half the battle.
that was G.I. Joe.
Was it
That was
both?
G.I. Joe.
Wait, what did He-Man say then? I don't know. You're right, but I guess it was G.I. Joe. Knowing is
Power
half
of
the battle.
Grayskull.
Let's go. No, wait, sorry.
It was, I can't remember what their catchphrase is, but perhaps someone will tell us. So, I mean, some stuff has to make way for new knowledge.
Okay, so we kind of drifted from the geography, but you get the idea.
really.
There's a lot of ways that we have to think about these things, and there's lots of different folks and things to talk to now. On to the event corner, of course, we want to encourage you to go out to events. These communities are back in person for a lot of them, even though some of them are still online. First one,
GIS-Pro is taking place October 7th through the 10th in Portland. No, not that Portland. Portland, Maine.
and then
NACIS 2024 is going to be October 16th through the 19th on the opposite coast in Tacoma, Washington.
of course, if you want us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
You can reach me at frank@veryspatial.com, and you can reach Barbara at barb@veryspatial.com.
I'm available at Kinda Spatial, and of course, if you'd like to find our contact information, it's veryspatial.com/contact.
As always, we're the folks from Very Spatial.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Coming and going, life's so quick. Without your gospel, I wouldn't know that I was sick. The Spirit took me by the eyes. My selfish heart had lost its way when I saw the man of light. Your hands are always reaching out, pointing towards the narrow road, so I don't drift out. God, the Spirit, I thank you for holding me in the thick of it and loving me through and through. Your Spirit is pulling on my soul. On the bitter days of life, you pull me closer, closer. Your Spirit is pulling on my soul, pointing me closer, every day closer. I'm always keeping my eyes peeled for the plans that you are letting loose to be caught and fulfilled. Spirit, lead my changing heart. Lead me by the light and pull me through the dark. Your Spirit is pulling on my soul. On the bitter days of life, you pull me closer, closer. Your Spirit on my